Hello and welcome back to Tree of Statism, Good and Evil. Today we want to talk about the basics of geopolitics. So I want to begin by asking you a question. Do you think you could do a better job than your politicians? I don't think so. I think it's very unlikely. Maybe you are a rare breed, but it should be noted that anyone that inherits the crown inherits a real kingdom. That is to say, you're not going to do everything you want without limits, because the real kingdom has real limits that anyone who gets the crown is going to have to face. That means the economy works a certain way. You may change it, it will take a while, and for now the economy works the way it works. The population is the same population as before. It may change over time, but you're going to inherit a nation of a certain type, of a certain size, and not something made up. Your neighbors are out of your control. Your neighbors are the same neighbors any king would have to deal with, whether it's you or your rival. The geography is the same geography. Your country does not magically move to somewhere better with a better geography or a worse geography. You have the limits that you have. Maybe you can conquer territory, but you are still limited to your geography. The first thing we want to look at is at your country's economics. Things like farmland produce wealth. The more farmland you have, the more people you can produce, and the more excess crops you can sell. This can produce excess population that allows you to build up mines, have blacksmiths, soldiers, and whatever else you want. However, you can't have all these extra professions if you don't have enough food and water. Waterways are also a good way to trade. It's much better than by trucks or by cars. It has always been much better. If you have good access to rivers or to the ocean, you can trade with faraway lands and get whatever you don't have and sell the excess of whatever it is you do have. Wealthy nations usually rise near the ocean or near rivers, big rivers, ones you can trade on. Your country's population is something that is going to change. It's going to change very, very slowly, and it is very hard to control. It takes decades for a person to reach adulthood. Even in some less advanced cultures, it still takes over a decade. That means that your population can grow by about 2 every 15 to 20 years at most. That means that it might grow slower, but it's a bit limited to about growing twice as much every 15, 20 years. Um, you also have a hard time controlling population. You can't tell people not to have children, and it's hard to force people to have children. And once they have the child, it still takes somewhere about 20 years for them to mature. Sometimes, if you want high quality populations, it takes them 30 years to mature because they need to go through college, they need to get study, they need to stabilize themselves in families, and only when they're mid 20s, 30s do they start being very, very productive. However, populations can crash. There can be a plague, there can be a war, the population can suddenly decrease. Furthermore, between wars, you still need to wait for the next batch of your population to reach adulthood. That is to say, that if you had a war and lost a bunch of soldiers, you still need to wait for the 10-year-olds to reach age 20 so that you can send them to the front for the next war. Also, we have the issue of population stability. The main problem with population stability is that it's very, very hard to make the populations like each other. That is to say, over a bunch of generations or centuries, we can unite them into one nation. However, you may inherit a bunch of tribes and a bunch of ethnicities, Shiites and Sunnis, Christians and Jews, Catholics and Protestants, blacks and whites. Whatever rival tribes hate each other, you're going to have a hard time uniting. And if they are not united, any king, you or your rival, are going to have a hard time uniting them. It's going to take centuries. It might take multiple generations. It's much, much easier said than done, and it's a long process. Your neighbors are going to want to take all of your resources. Anything you want to have, they want to take. The borders you have must be defensible. And when your neighbors are strong and you're weak, you're going to have a hard time fending them off, no matter who is king. A weak army is not magically made strong by a king. It takes a lot of time and it's easier said than done. However, if your neighbors are weak and you are strong, any king can stand up to them. It's not really up to the king. It's up to the generals and kings before you that built your army when you inherited the kingdom. One great example is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great seems like a great and magnificent king that erupted out of nowhere. He conquered Greece and then Persia in 12 years, and after he died, his empire collapsed. This seems like a great feature brought together by a king, and as soon as we lost that king, it all fell apart. But a lot of the credit actually belongs to his father. Before King Alexander the Great, we had King Philip. He reformed the army and extended the kingdom. They went from being a small kingdom over Macedonia to a larger kingdom that also ruled Greece. He promised the Greeks to fight the Persians, and died just in time to give his son the crown, a big army, and a united kingdom that wanted to fight the Persians. Also, people forget that the kingdom collapsed after Alexander because Alexander did not leave a clear successor. A civil war erupted over who would be king. The kingdom did not fall apart because of some kind of external problem, but because that inside the kingdom the successors could not unite under them. Alexander left it an unstable kingdom for a bunch of generals to fight over. Stalin is another great example. Stalin came to power after the revolution. When Stalin was in power, there were a bunch of revolutionaries who had just successfully overthrown the Tsar, and they were ready to revolt against Stalin if he would stray from the path. What is the path? Whatever each communist wanted, there could be a bunch of rebellions for a bunch of different reasons. This means that Stalin had to deal with the rebels, and he did so heavy-handedly. But no one could have taken his place and done it without some violence. Maybe they would not have gone to the level that Stalin went to, but you can't deal with the revolutionaries without suppressing them to a certain degree, because there is no utopia, and you can never satisfy rebels that want power or want a position or think that some kind of ideal utopia can come about. No one could have taken his place and done it without violence. Maybe they could have done it, probably could have done it, with significantly less violence, but not without it altogether. Forgetting kings for a moment, let's talk about kingdoms. Was it inevitable that England would conquer Scotland and Wales? Well, no, not even close. They had the homeland advantage of having a lot of mountains, making it hard to conquer. However, England had the advantage of farmlands, better farmlands. The farmlands are significantly colder, and they don't grow crops as well. This means that England became a stronger economic power. This could be translated directly into military power. Just think about it. The English had lots of planes for lots of horses, they had a large pool of manpower. Even today, England itself is about 10 times the population size of Scotland. This would translate directly into military power. Now, it was not inevitable that England would conquer Scotland and Wales. They could have remained disunited kingdoms, separate kingdoms. However, if one side was going to conquer the other, it was always going to be England conquering Scotland and Wales, because they would have more military power, and Scotland and Wales could not leave their high ground, their mountain areas, without exposing themselves to a much larger English army. France is a great example of what a kingdom looks like after it follows its interests for centuries, and one would argue 1,000 years. France is very flat, which made it rich. However, it made it easy to invade. The history of France is trying to kick out the invaders, and trying to push outwards towards defensible borders. France has mountain borders to the south, so it is kind of divided from Spain or Hispania, the Iberian Peninsula. To the northwest, it is protected by an ocean. This ocean, once they reached it, made it much harder to invade since you needed to invade with an amphibious assault. To the northwest, to the southeast, there are very few passageways that could be held with forts. Only to the northeast was it exposed, and they were trying to push all the way to the Rhine River. The reason is that the Rhine River was a big, wide river that could be held quite easily. In almost every direction, France advanced towards defensible borders. Once it reached those defensible borders, it began focusing on different borders. If the south is protected, you push north. If the west is protected, you push east. If every direction is protected, you stay out of wars, you build up your wealth, and you build an empire when the time is right. In our next episode, The Wars of the 2030s, we will be discussing the major conflicts we expect based on our current political and geopolitical situation. However, I'd like to ask you one question before we end this episode. Do you think destiny is inevitable? Can a king make a difference? Probably yes, he can screw up. That is usually felt quickly. However, dramatic changes take time. You can change your country massively over the next 50 to 100 years based on your policies. However, any policy instituted today is going to take time to take its effect. Big wars will come, big changes will occur, big processes will change. Destiny is not inevitable. Destiny can change, but it's hard to change, and it takes a lot of time. Is your country a banana republic? Could you do better than your leaders? Tell us why below. We'd like to learn. Would it be quick changes or slow changes? Go ahead and tell us in the comments. If you like this video, please comment, upvote, and subscribe. If you want to help further, go and watch my other videos. And if you like them as well, do the same over there. Also, please share this video and any other video you might think people might take interest in. If you want to support me further, you can buy my book on Amazon, Ancapistan by Noah Goodman. Thank you for watching, and good night.